Hey all, it's November 7th, the day after our midterm election, and I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the map of the United States and how we lost the House as conservatives and Republicans, and libertarians. And I'm thinking to myself, I've lived in cities and I've lived in rural areas. And in rural areas, you usually, even though they're small towns, a lot of them, and small towns tend to be very quaint and people get to know each other fairly closely, you do not see the mass amount of public shaming that you see within a city. And it's very similar in nature to my experience with high school in the 80s. And you might say, well, how is that? And I will tell you. In the 80s, things like designer jeans and Reebok shoes were popular in my school in upstate New York. I begged and begged and begged my mother to buy me certain brands like Reebok or gasoline jeans, for instance, so that I could fit in with the crowd in my class. The popular people, I still to this day have no idea what made them popular. It makes no sense to me. I have these people on my Facebook now, and they are no different than any other people that I run into in daily life. These people have not turned out to be rich millionaires. These people have not turned out to be super successful. As a matter of fact, some of them are a lot worse off than I am. Just saying. So, I'm looking at this situation like this. You've got these huge, massive areas that have voted Democrat. Okay? Within those areas, you have a small amount of people who vote Republican. Some of them, such a small amount, that it is almost impossible to fathom that these people could be that much more Democrat than Republican in an area. So why is it that you've got 70% of an area, for instance, I saw last night in California in a community, 70% of the community, I think it was like 78, was voted Democrat for somebody that is awful. I think it was Maxine Waters or something, one of these people that's just a vile human being. And such a small, minute amount as 20-some-odd% voted otherwise, either Democrat or independent, or Republican or independent. It's the same mentality as you have in high school. Following the agenda, fitting in with the crowd. PC, for instance, is one of those agendas. The idea of public shaming for politically incorrect speech and the creation of the politically incorrect speech. Who is creating what is politically incorrect? Now, we all know, as conservatives, that if you bring people into the country that are not documented, you cannot track them when they commit crimes. You cannot track them when they need financial assistance or if they're working somewhere. They do not belong in this country unless they are American citizens or they've got a visa or green card to become American citizens or work here temporarily. And the reason being is because this affects our economy and our work for our people in this country. These people who live in these mass cities live with tons of these people around them. And in doing so, I believe they are brainwashed into believing that just because these people happen to be nice people, that all of the people who come in illegally are nice people. Or that they all deserve to stay because they're just so nice and they're our community. But they aren't our community in all communities. if you get my drift. Some communities don't have a bunch of illegal immigrants in them. Some communities have an excessive amount of illegal immigrants in them. The ones that do have an excessive amount do not do so well financially. There is a lot of people who are unemployed, for instance, or cannot find even small part-time work, who are American citizens. People who wind up on food stamps or assistance of some sort. If you extracted the people who do not belong here legally, there would open up an avenue for everyone that's on assistance to regain their footing. But what happens is these people wind up getting basically ousted out of their position in society, and they wind up going downhill. They get on assistance, they wind up depressed, they wind up on either pharmaceutical or recreational drugs, they don't do well, and it's a spiraling cesspool of society. But back to the point. The grand democratic socialist cities, when you live in one of these, which I have, you can't walk around in your Americana gear. You can't support certain types of ideals. If you were to do so publicly, you would be ostracized. It would be a point where you could not work anywhere around other people. You could not run a business if you voiced your opinions. Public shaming. It's the same kind of public shaming that the Catholic Church used, or other, as a matter of fact, all churches have used, to keep people following their moral mindset for thousands of years. And people who are in these cities who are politicians, like the Democrats, know that if they start a campaign of public shaming throughout their area, they get the people to shame their neighbors into following the prescribed ideal for long enough, they begin to believe that that is the right ideal, and they will refuse, through cognitive dissonance, to explore any other ideals. Once in a while, you'll get somebody who walks away. Somebody who it's never felt right to, they've never felt like they fit in, and they felt like they were lying to themselves, and they could not take that any longer, and they will walk away. A lot of them just flee the cities and go find themselves somewhere else to go. Some of them wind up medicating their minds to a point where it doesn't matter. This is a huge, large, monstrous, propaganda-driven problem. It is an infiltration of the social order by politicians and people in control to massively brainwash and use and abuse mobs of people. Get them to go to the polls. Get them to keep them in power. Get them to vote Democrat. Get them to follow and toe the line. That is why I have been calling them sheeple for so long. How do we wake these people up? How do we get these people who care more about the appearances on the outside than what is truly factual on the inside to wake up? How do we save our country from mass ignorance driven by corrupt politicians using large groups of people and creating these societies that shame each other into following their fucking plan? I don't know exactly how to wake them up. I don't know how to get them to look at what's being done to them. But it's so obvious that that's what is being done. I've met people and talked to them on an individual basis, and they technically agree with most libertarian and semi, on the conservative side, fiscal and logical ideas. If you don't make them feel like they're going to be ostracized for voicing their opinion. That's just horrible. It's bullying. And then these are the people that say, oh, don't bully, don't do this, don't coerce, don't blah, 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 blah. You can't manipulate. They're the biggest manipulators that there are on the planet. These people are manipulating not just their mate, their husband, their wife, their child. These people are manipulating entire populations of cities and suburban areas. These people are trying to manipulate society. Not because an idea is right, not because an idea is just, not because an idea is good for the future, but because an idea that they have will either benefit them financially or keep them in power. It is sickening. This is poison. It is absolutely societal poison. And I'm not a biblical preacher, but this is kind of like the Tower of Babel, if you think about it. All these people are speaking the same language. They're all like just parrots repeating this PC narrative that they have been fed, that they have been forced into, that they are being used by politicians and people in power, and being basically bullied into following. And they don't even realize it. They think that they're putting on a good show in front of everybody, that they're virtue signaling, that they're being virtuous and just, because they've been told so much that this is the right thing to do. Just because something appears to be the right thing to do on the outside does not mean that it's the right thing to do on the inside. Like, think about it this way. You're in a grocery store with a child, and the child is, you're in the checkout line, and the child is crying and crying and crying and wants that candy bar on the rack next to you. And everybody around you is just terribly disgruntled that your child is crying. And you give that child that candy bar. And in the long run, every time you go to that checkout counter now in the future, that child's going to make that crying noise, piss everybody off in line, and you're going to be forced to give them the candy bar. But if you don't give them the candy bar that one time, they don't get what they want, then the likelihood of them repeating the action is kind of on the smaller side. I don't know how to break this social system. I don't know how to break the cliques of the cities. And that's what they are. They're just like the cliques in high school. I have experience with groups like that. Group mentality is not a good thing. It's time to step outside the box. Think for yourselves. Don't follow what you're fed. It's time to wake up. It's time to try to wake other people up. Otherwise, they will win by mob mentality. And that was their plan all along. And if they can't win by that, they'll win by voter fraud and getting illegals to vote. And they've got the mob mentality to pass the laws to make it okay to do so. We need national IDs. We need voter laws enforced. Fight on, patriots. Fight on.